The overall fan shape, I'm okay. Like, I understand why, like from the church's vision, like that could be helpful. But I think what's triggering to you and I is a lot of times the back wall.
Yeah.
Because if that is curved, we are creating a perfect reflector back to stage. So architects, please stop that.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't do a parabolic reflector back to stage. Okay.
I mean, let's think of other things that share the same shape. Radar dishes that are designed to reflect energy right back to a point.
And they do a great job.
They do a great job of that.
Hey, welcome everyone to the Gear Follows Vision podcast. My name is Deron. We're here to talk about audio, video, and lighting systems and how they should serve your church's heart and vision, not the other way around. Today, I'm excited to have Andrew Starke on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you.
Excited to be digging into some topics with you. But man, first off, will you give us just a little bit of your background and history?
Yeah. I've been in live production world, I guess now for coming up close 25, 30 years, which makes me sound a whole lot older than I feel.
The grays are there for a reason.
Yeah,
so
they're there for a
we
reason.
Get it.
But last 6 years at Summit in what is our solution architect role. Prior to that, an audio director at a church called North Point Community Church in Atlanta, Georgia. And prior to that, a part of Hillsong in Australia forever. I mean, from attending as a kid in youth group in like 10th grade, because it was my local church, through to, eventually serving on their production staff for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So you started in audio roles and then kind of moved into more just overall production roles.
Well, I started as a musician.
Yeah. Let's go.
Yeah. So, musicians make the best audio engineers, right? So it kind of progressed from that into mixing sound and always loved the church, right? It was kind of the thing that I felt drawn to and that I wanted to kind of make my life about, right? So finding a way to take music, and kind of serve the ministry that I was a part of, and kind of put it all together, just kind of naturally led me into production.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so what was your instrument or instruments?
Bass player. Look, I mean, if I'm being real, like musicians turn sound guys, I want to say about 8 out of 10 of them are bass players.
Yeah.
Like the stats don't lie.
Wow, that's a lot. Yeah. Although I think the bass players, I mean, they need a good drummer, which is what I started in.
Yeah.
So at least we both have rhythm where, some electric guitars, questionable whether or not they have rhythm. But anyway, let's not go down that road.
Controversial hot take.
It's funny like that. My journey started with a love for music as well, right?
Yeah.
Like there was this capturing of my heart through worship that I wanted to just like, man, I just want to be a part of this. And so I taught myself drums probably poorly. The amount of times I rushed a fill is too many to count when I was trying to teach myself drums. But yeah, there's just this connection to the music and the experience and wanting to help make it better for everyone.
There is. I mean, when I was training volunteers and trying to, recruit people into mixing roles, it's like I will take someone who is not technical but musical over someone who is technical and try to get them to think like a musician. Yeah. And I think even, the topics we're talking about, like, I think that carries all the way through.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Well, today, what I want to dig into together, because I think we've both grown passionate about this, although I don't think we started passionate in our career around acoustics.
Yeah.
I think what we've found is that like it's a big part of the experience, right? When people say, I want my room to sound great, most of the time they talk about their PA, but if the acoustics are a hot pile of garbage, like it's not going to be a good PA in a room with a hot pile of garbage acoustics, right? So I think you and I both grown really passionate about that.
Yeah.
But I'd love to like start like, man, I wonder if you have one of those like worst rooms you've ever mixed in or worst experiences you've had. Like your mix is incredible and it's just going into a soup of acoustics.
Which one?
Yeah, you have several, right?
Yeah, I can think of a number, and like I like to think like I've spent most of my mixing career in subpar acoustic environments, which has on the one hand honestly helped in some regards, but also on a lot of other hands created a lot of like, I want to fix this for everybody else.
Yeah, for sure.
From like, oh, we need an acoustic solution, let's just hang a drape along the back wall, which, as we know, is not a solution. It's a solution.
Yeah.
But it's not a holistic solution. But I mean, so rewinding the clock, I remember there was a season where I was touring and just mixing front of house. And like, I remember we were pulling into a venue and there were 2 arenas. One was a nice brand new arena. The other one I think was repurposed for selling cattle. I don't know, something like that. So obviously we pull into the one they're selling cattle. And we're setting up the stage, and I just remember the drummer hits the kick, and I heard 4 distinct kicks.
Oh,
following that initial hit, and I'm just like dying a little bit on the inside, going like, "Oh, what are we doing here? Like, how are we going to survive this?" And rehearsal felt really rough. But once we got people in the room, I mean, people are some of the best acoustic treatment there is. And once people got in the room, a fundamental different experience turned into one of the best nights we'd had the whole trip.
Wow.
But it kind of started with this like, I'm in trouble. And I think a lot of people experience the same thing where, they kind of get into a room, they start mixing, think they're in trouble. And just that difference of like where you start to where you finish the night, and how the room transforms from empty to people filling the space. Like there's a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety that kind of can live between those two moments.
Yeah. And how the room is constructed and all the materials around it make a big difference, whether those giant bags of water called people are going to dramatically affect it. Right. And so like in that arena, it's probably all concrete everywhere with hard chairs. And so like they dramatically change, the acoustical properties where, there's other ways to mitigate that we can get into. But yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities. I mean, some of the best shows I've ever heard have been outdoors. Yeah. Right. And
there's a reason for that.
There's a reason for that, because we wrap these rooms that are oddly shaped or really, have high volume around incredible PA systems and expected to sound great. Right. But trying to get that outdoor experience of like, directivity and all the things is really needed. But I remember a show that I heard way back in the day, and it was the worst room. It was one of those arenas that just, it wasn't full enough at the time. They didn't quite sell it enough. And the guy was just trying to overcompensate by pushing the PA louder and louder. And no shade on him at all. Like I would have probably been doing the exact same thing. But just remembering that as like, man, there's a way to fix this. It's not the PA, right? Because it was one of the high dollar PAs out there, right? It was really just the acoustics and the lack of people that made it really challenging. But
I think you touched on something there that I think a lot of people overlook, right? It's like one of the solutions to bad acoustics, just make it loud. At some point, what you're trying to do is trying to overcome the room so that you feel like you're not fighting all of that like echo and reverberation. And, when people complain about, oh, this just feels loud. Well, there might actually be a legitimate reason for that. Yeah.
Well, and I think a properly treated, a properly designed room, you can run it lower and quieter is what we found. And I think that's kind of the goal, is to like make the whole thing work together. So, but let's start from like when we're entering into these conversations, right? And I know you're big on driving towards vision. Like, what's the vision of what we want the whole experience to be? There's a couple things I think we talk about, but I'd love to hear like one of the first things we need to talk about is what is the musical style of this church. So unpack like, how does style impact acoustical choices that we might be making?
Very good question. I think, anytime we go into a programming conversation with a church, it's literally like, hey, tell me about your band. What's your band makeup? And that serves a couple of different needs, but one of them is like, okay, like what are we going for? Like, what are we going for in terms of like PA style, PA voicing, right? And room shaping and SPL, right? Like volume. At the end, I think all of those things basically tie into whether we have a live band that just want to have at it, right? Or we're kind of going into something that's a little bit more like traditional orchestral or choir driven and everything in between, or a combination of all of that, which is the wild card.
Yeah. There's
what kind of band do you have? Yes,
we have all
everything.
Yeah, for sure. Like in the acoustical approach, it's, man, if we have the modern rock and roll band, that's one acoustical treatment approach that we could look at, room shaping approach. But then also like if the room has to project the choir, the orchestra from stage, that's very different.
It's very different. If with a traditional kind of 5-piece, whatever piece band, like we're obviously going to try to mitigate a lot of stage noise, right? And treat a lot of that so that doesn't make it into the congregation or the audience, and it feels a little bit more controlled. But do that same thing to a choir. And we're actually taking away the very thing we're trying to get out into the room.
Right.
And that also kind of creates a lot of issues when we're also approaching renovations, right? Like you've experienced the same thing, right? The church was built back in the 2000s or 90s when choirs were in.
Yeah.
And then now they've transitioned their style, and the acoustic design that they've been living with has not changed in order to support where they're going.
Yeah, that 3-second reverb tail in the top of the room doesn't work great when you want the bass to slap.
Yeah, 3.5 to 4 seconds if you're throwing a whole lot of subs in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's one of the first questions I think that we have to get answered. I think the second is audience reinforcement is kind of the term, right? But like, how much do they want the congregation to hear each other sing, right? Even just next to each other, but then the entire congregation sing, right? Because that changes a lot of approach. Whether or not that's ceiling height or with clouds or, wall, reinforcement. So I think there's a lot in there, but I'd be curious, like, I think most churches, I'd be curious how much you hear most churches say they want both, right? They want to hear people sing and they want, that modern rock and band to be incredible.
And I think we've also seen that transition a lot as well, right? Like if I were to think of like the 2010s, maybe late 2000s, like we're really talking about like, I want to make it feel loud and big enough that like you don't feel awkward, right? You're not hearing other people and thinking, oh my gosh, is that what I'm sounding like when I sing? Right? Whereas now I feel like the vibe is like, no, we kind of just want a collective voice. We don't want to hear individuals. We kind of just want people to feel like there's a collective voice, right? And then so that when there's any kind of response or anything, like it's not lost, right?
Yeah, that's really good. And that goes along with also the third thing we have to talk about, right? Which is what do you want the PA volume to be at, right? Because there are some folks who have very strong thoughts around that. And there's other folks who are just like, can we throw out the number, just talk about what we want? Which I actually love that approach of like, what do you want people to experience? But I think that's the other thing we have to talk about. And so, dig in a little bit to that of like, what do you hear people say around PA volume and how does that change your acoustical approach?
Well, I'd actually love to get some of your thoughts on this as well. Cause like what I've found is SPL is one of the most largely misunderstood ways to quantify volume, right? Like it's completely relative in so many ways, right? It's relative to the room and the existing acoustic footprint in the space. Is it 92 at 1K or is it 92 at like 4? Like, you know what I mean? Like it's possible to have a 92 dB mix that hurts your ears, depending on just how the mix is shaped and how the band is made up and what you're doing with that, right? So I think we try to tap into more than just like, hey, give me your volume. The volume is good, but tell me about your feel. I had a project here in Denver, and the guy who was, I would say if he gave me a number, I felt pretty confident about the context he was applying to that. Not to get nerdy, but you get what I mean, right?
For sure.
he knew what that meant.
Yes.
But he's like, I want to mix around 90 to 92 dB, but I want to feel the kick hit me in the chest. And I'm like, ooh, let's go. The first, my response to him is I'm like, this is going to be less about the PA and it's going to be a whole lot more with what we do acoustically in the room to make sure when that sub hits and throws back 100 feet, you're able to still feel it in your chest. So let's dig into this, right?
For sure.
That was kind of our approach through that project.
Yeah, I think for me, knowing what they want to do from the PA volume is really helpful to know what we're going to do with the back wall, right? Because the PA is pointed in some level at that back wall because we don't have infinite height, but knowing how we're going to treat it, because I think the myth that people think is, oh, just put 2-inch acoustics back there and it's going to knock it down completely. And man, if we want to upgrade 4 inches of absorption is going to do just dandy. But knowing like, man, we want 100 dB throughout this auditorium means there's 100 dB hitting that back wall. And I think the biggest unlock light bulb for me in learning acoustics was that your typical panel is only going to knock it down 20 decibels, roughly. Rough math, I'm not that nerd, but about 20 dB. So if I hit the back wall at 100, it's coming back through at 80. A lot of those frequencies.
Well, let's complicate that a little bit more. You're hitting the back wall at 100 dB. You're probably landing about 108 to 110 at about 60 hertz. Right? Your sub is obviously, few dB on top of that.
Slamming.
And I think that's one of the things I learned actually here at Summit, which was actually a really cool thing that, you know, Summit had figured out through a lot of like trial and error and through like a lot of earlier projects is like, what are we doing with low end? Yeah. And I think that's why that 2-inch, 4-inch, I mean, panels have a purpose, right? Like I'm not throwing them under the bus, but I'm like, most acoustic modeling is only capable of being modeled down to 100 hertz, like Ease, right?
Yeah.
Ease is not going to tell you what's going on beneath 100. 100 is trial and error.
Yeah.
Under 100 hertz is where we're just making stuff up, is what it feels like. And I have some stories. But anyways, I think like one of the kind of things Summit's kind of done historically in doing like a bass trap was a complete game changer in terms of like, okay, we recognize low frequencies have a wavelength that is substantial, much bigger than huge, right? So in order to capture that and basically, you know, turn that energy into heat, like dissipate it, whatever, we need a lot of material. So, you know, one of the things we end up pitching in our conversations with the church is like, hey, how do we factor in, you know, 8 to 12 feet of acoustic material somewhere in the room, deep, which
fit a car in there.
Architects love this conversation. It's like they've just pitched this beautiful room to the church and they're feeling really great about it. And then we're like, okay, I'm going to take this corner and I'm going to put a whole lot of stuff right here.
It's going to be real ugly.
And the GC kind of gives you a funny look, but I mean, we've got enough runs on the board at this point, and you know, we can take people through enough venues where we've, you know, done this. I'd call it the traditional approach, which, because we have other approaches now that we've added to our toolbox, but that traditional approach of like, no, a massive material that allows all that energy to enter and not to leave on the back wall, so that all that low freak makes it through the audience, gets caught on that back wall and doesn't come back. And so when you hit that kick, there's one kick, not four, which is great.
That's a choice, I guess. We could have four,
choice,
though.
I mean, more is more. But you get that feel as well. Like you get that chest feel that like a lot of people want, and without having to be at an obnoxious volume.
And I think that's what we've learned through trial and error, and honestly, like great people who have kind of coached us and mentored us, who are smarter than us for sure. We're super thankful for all that. But there is this bit of like mysticism, it feels like, around acousticians. And there is a lot of science data behind it. And at the same point, somebody who's really made it work in the past, you know, we've learned from and learned some of those principles, and we get to apply them. And again, like the bass trap, like how loud they want to run that room is going to help us dictate like how important is that bass trap, right? And the volume of the space. So, but let's dig in, because I know we mentioned like, you know, breaking the hearts of architects. You know, we try to build a good relationship there, of course, but I'd love to talk about when we have this great relationship with the architect, like when we're involved early, which is part of the challenge too, and we get to speak into the design of the acoustics, and not just like, well, we open next week, but we need some acoustics. You know, that's not our ideal, but our ideal is to be involved early, because I think it's kind of three buckets that I want us to talk about, right? The buckets of like room shape, right? That affects the acoustical design and approach. Of course, like the surface treatment, let's call it, or the acoustical treatment, and then also the PA, right? And so like, I want to talk about each of those three a bit, but I'd love to know from you, like when we look at room shape, are there certain room shapes that you walk into and you're like, this is gonna be challenging, or you see it on paper and you get a little trauma, a little PTSD? Like, what are those room shapes for you right now?
Oof. Anytime I see anything that resembles a fan, right? Fan-shaped room. It's the go-to for like so many. I mean, you know, not trying to throw shade on architects by any means, but when you're used to building a certain type of space, like a office or something like that, and you're looking at auditoriums, like one of the first things you're gonna kind of designs you're gonna look at is a fan-shaped room. Brings everyone close to the stage. Right? Kind of makes it feel like everyone has an equal footing. If you're standing on the stage, it's great to look out and just see if people around you, right? If you know, if that's kind of what you're going for. But acoustically and PA design wise, it's one of the hardest rooms to create consistency in both you know, feel and experience.
I agree with that. I'll say on that, where The overall fan shape, I'm okay. Like,
Yeah.
I understand why, like from the church's vision, like that could be helpful. But I think what's triggering to you and I is a lot of times the back wall.
Yeah.
Because if that is curved, we are creating a perfect reflector back to stage. So architects, please stop that.
Yeah,
Okay. Don't
please.
do a parabolic reflector back to stage. Okay.
I mean, let's think of other things that share the same shape. Radar dishes that are designed to reflect energy right back to a point.
And they do a great job.
They do a great job of that. Like, but it's real. I remember we were brought in super early on a recent project that we're finishing currently, right? And I remember the very first design the architect threw across the table was a fan-shaped room.
Yeah.
And I kind of pulled the church aside afterwards, and I'm like, everything you've told me about who you are, the style of what you want to do, and the experience that you want to have, this is not you.
Sure.
We should look at other
Yeah.
options. And I think they agreed, which is great. And that sent us on a 6-month, 9-month kind of journey of visiting other churches, looking at shapes, trying to figure out for them, like, what is the right feel? What is the feel that kind of supports the experience that they're trying to have, that we felt confident, like, hey, if audio is your number one priority, like if you look at this kind of shaped room and we apply this acoustic package or this kind of acoustic approach, we can hit that. Yeah, it really does. It starts with gear follows vision, right? And that vision doesn't just apply to gear. That vision applies to, like, how do we sometimes stand between the church and the architect and kind of help close some of those gaps, right? The church isn't thinking about, like, acoustic design and approaches like this is their one building or two buildings that they're going to build across, their tenure as a production director or a senior pastor in the church. They don't have that depth of experience where we get to kind of leverage ours, for their benefit and stand in that gap.
Yeah, for sure. Well, especially because we are ultimately responsible for the audio experience in the room. Like, a big part of that being the acoustics. Like, we want to step in and be a partner. And I think we've also had, incredible architectural designs that we're like, dude, this looks amazing. You've captured all the vision right. So let us tweak a room shape or a wall shape or something like that, right? I think the other one that I'll just throw out is parallel walls. If all the walls are parallel, that's a problem. But like, there's some little things we've done even recently for a church up here that's going into Loveland, where we've just tweaked some parallel walls out by a couple degrees. It doesn't take a lot.
Doesn't take much.
It didn't kill any seats, but it made a significantly better experience. So, room shape, the wall shape. The other thing I'll put in here that's really important that we want to dig into is volume, like the sheer height, right? Like, taller is not necessarily better from an acoustical standpoint, right? And so, we have some projects where, it's 60, 70 feet up, which means if you want to hear people sing, right? That wavelength has to go all the way up to the roof and all the way back down 70 feet. It's just so late that people won't feel that engagement. They won't feel the audience.
But even the way we approach, let's say we talked about bass traps earlier. There's a relationship between the volume of a space, like physical volume of a space, and the volume of material and absorption needed to kind of control low frequency in that space. Right. So, like, when we deal with these really big rooms, maybe a cantilevered 45-degree kind of isn't an approach because it's huge. I remember we designed one once just as a alternate to a different approach that we had. And it stuck out like 15, 16 feet in the room. And it's like, I know this is big, but we're looking at a ratio of physical volume of the space to the volume of treatment that's needed. It was one time I threw kind of our design under the bus a little bit, and I'm like, this is not the right design.
Right.
I know this is kind of what you're accustomed to based on like previous projects, but for this project, we need a different approach and start to go down that path with them.
And it needs to be custom for them, right? And so I'm glad. I think that's a great segue into, like, okay, when we look at treatment, right, there's kind of two basic buckets, right? There's absorption, which is what that bass trap is, right? And then we use diffusion at times too. So talk about, like, when we just look at surface applied treatment, when are you looking at one versus the other?
I think diffusion is really critical for audience engagement, right? So diffusion is like, I don't want a direct echo of someone's voice. So like diffusion, if I have the choice, I like to think of diffusion as usually an audience facing thing, right? And the absorption is usually behind the audience, or kind of like, really stopping those reflections. Like, yes, I can turn away and I can look in a different direction. I won't necessarily hear those direct reflections, but they're they're there.
Right.
Right. And so a lot of times, like we talked about parallel walls, the traditional sawtooth approach, right, is kind of the sawtooth, the flat end of the sawtooth facing the audience, right? If that makes sense, like that. Yeah. I like to flip that and think of it like I would rather have the reflective part of the sawtooth face the audience, because to me, that's engagement. I want them to be reflected back to them, and on the front side, usually try to make that acoustically transparent, or even just open and do like a tuck fabric with some infill or something like that. Like catch that energy coming off the PA so it doesn't necessarily reflect back in the audience, but reflect the audience back to themselves.
Yeah.
For me, it actually reminds me of a project here in Denver. And it was one of the first times I felt like toe to toe with an actual acoustician with a degree versus me, who's just like, I'm a sound guy. I have opinions.
I'm a bass guitarist from Australia.
Yes.
What's the problem?
Yeah. You should do this. But it was the church inherited what was a 130-foot long concrete tube.
Sounds great.
30-foot high ceilings, arched walls, and some level of kind of like angle in the wall, which was great.
Nice.
But I remember attending one of their services. This is during COVID. Like everything was kind of locked down. They just done this church swap with another church, who was like, we're like 30 people in a room that can fit 700. So they just swapped buildings with them.
Yeah.
And I attended one of their services during COVID, and I'm just sitting there listening, and I'm like, oh, I'm in trouble. We're doing this project, and I'm hearing, the kick last about 3 to 4 seconds.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing what to me just sounded literally like a parking garage. Right.
In
if you've
a
ever
concrete
tried
tube.
in a concrete
makes
tube.
sense.
Yeah. So we kind of continued along the project. We're working with one of our favorite architects, Brian Harder. Hi, Brian, if you're listening.
Brian.
Love you.
Hi, Brian.
Miss you. He was fantastic. And I remember as we're starting the project, he even pitched an idea for a bass trap, which is why we love some of these architects that are like, we see the value in this. We've experienced the value.
Yeah.
That's a tangent. But I know Brian suggested what would have been like a typical summit approach. And I went to Brian. I'm like, I don't know if this is going to work. Let's rethink this. Yeah. So what we ended up doing was turning the entire 130-foot long kind of ceiling into a bass trap.
Yeah, let's go.
Which actually created a number of other kind of perks for the church as well. Like they were able to kind of tie in HVAC into that. They were able to tie in like fire and a lot of other things to bring the building up to code. And I'm like, you're welcome.
Yeah. It's a service that we provided.
But I remember I pitched the idea and they'd kind of like, still in the discovery phase with us in Summit. And they're like, we want to get kind of an acoustician's opinion. And I'm like, great, let's do it.
Yeah.
Their opinion came back. And again, it's not wrong,
Right.
but for them it wasn't right, right? And their recommendation went to the extremes such as, let's not build the stage out of concrete, let's build it out of wood, because wood has an absorption coefficient, right? And then let's kind of fur out all the concrete walls with studs and drywall and do this, because and started listing kind of the way that was going to treat the room. And I'm looking at their projection. They're like, we're going to take 60 hertz down from 3.5 seconds to 2.5 seconds. And that's an improvement.
Yep.
But in my conversation with the church, I'm like, that's not what you want. Like, to get that feel that you're telling me you want, we got to bring it down to under a second.
Right.
Like, we have to take a concrete tube and bring 60 hertz, like RT60, down to like less than a second.
Yeah.
So what we proposed was basically a bass trap along the entire ceiling, which is the 4-foot deep basket of insulation, blown-in insulation. The architect then created a false ceiling around it, but then we also applied some of the other principles we just talked about. On the sawtooth walls facing the stage, that's where we use the 4-inch panels.
Yeah.
Right? I wanted to capture
no
PA
reflections
energy.
back. Yep.
Exactly. But then on the side of the sawtooth facing the audience, we left that completely bare.
Right.
So if you're looking at the stage, you don't even see the acoustic treatment on the wall. Yeah. And the whole purpose of that is like their whole experience was based around liturgy and call and response.
Yeah.
And so if we go in there with a acoustic material everywhere and we actually pull the audience out of the room, we're doing their service a disservice,
right,
by kind of not letting them function in the way that they want to function.
Yeah.
So, acoustics have to have to kind of be married to the execution, right? To the style, to the PA and everything else. One of the coolest things for me about that project now is like years later bringing people into that building and like them saying like, we did not expect it to feel like this.
Right.
Like we look at it from the outside and we immediately draw conclusions.
Yeah. So I think what's really amazing about what you're able to do there is you're able to use absorption where needed, right? It's a 130-foot tube. So you need to absorb a lot of energy to get the reverberation down. And you use reflections to your advantage, right? And said, man, I'm going to reflect back the audience too, because they want to hear themselves sing. And I think the beauty of that is it's, again, a holistic approach. And so like using absorption where we need to remove reverberation, using diffusion where like you want the energy, but we just need to redirect it. Like sometimes diffusion can be, good on a back wall where we've got a line array hitting it and we just need to redirect some of that energy because the absorption won't be sufficient. But I know like there's the other thing that I've run into, and I know you've run into too, is if we over deaden a room, a couple things happen. One, the PA becomes an ice pick, right? Like it is right here. It is, even at 90 dB, you're like, for the love, I don't need to be attacked like this. But then also like if we do too much reverberation absorption and we don't treat all the echoes, that creates other problems, right?
Oh, 100%. It's like sometimes over treating or incorrectly treating a room is about as bad as not treating the room. I mean, I spent years mixing in a room that was like the designer's like, hey, we're going to have every single surface in this room is basically a 2-inch panel.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was special.
Wow, that's something.
It was really difficult.
Yeah.
But it's like we're also hitting 90 to 100 on a Sunday morning. Yeah. And that had really very little to do with like we just wanted to be this loud and more just to do like with that much treatment. We had the same problem, right? Yeah. Like of having to push the volume to overcome the room. I recently explained to someone like this, they were talking about how they installed some curtains to kind of section off the room to create a smaller, classic. We know and love that very well.
Oh gosh, it's effective at certain frequencies.
But one of the things they mentioned is like, man, we feel like the acoustics got worse when we added this. And I'm like, oh, explain that to me.
Yeah.
And we actually had an opportunity to go and listen to what they were describing in the room. And I explained it to him this way. It's like reverb is a whole lot of little echoes or varying echoes of time and direction, right? That make up the feeling of reverb, right? As soon as we start cutting off some of those echoes, we can turn that reverb into a slapback. And that's exactly what they're experiencing, right? Like, and so that there's always a fine line and a balance of like, hey, we need the treatment, like you said. It needs to exist. It needs to exist in the right place. It needs to exist in the right place relative to the PA. And it needs to exist in the right place relative to the PA and the audience. And there's a balancing act in that.
Absolutely.
And one that I think like if you just, and again, we're not throwing shade on architects by any means. It's just contextually, like they're correct in the approach, but contextually it can be incorrect, right? I think what we try to do in that balance of shaping, in that balance of absorption and reflection is find the sweet spot where, hey, we're going to hit your vision no matter what. It is going to feel great. And if you're willing to do the work, you're going to have a room that's going to last you like 40, 50, 60 years. Like I would argue, and I know you would too, because we've talked about this, right? It is more important to invest the money in treating a space and doing it well, because that decision is potentially a 20, 30, 40, 50-year decision, right? Versus a PA, which, if done well, is maybe a 15-year decision. And so the effort, the time, the back and forth, the blood, sweat, and tears, right? And getting the room shaped right and getting it treated right is worth it in every way.
Well, and it's only, again, like it's only half the, even we would say in a third of the equation, right? To saying, the PA can only affect 33%. And so like, yeah, sure, let's get the PA in the right spot. We want the PA design to be right, all of that stuff. And that's in a different podcast for us. But like making sure we have a good acoustical package. So I know we've even encouraged people to take money out of the PA budget and buy some treatment. Because overall, that's a better experience for the people in the space than, and just having the, the latest, greatest, whatever PA technology or, enough headroom to, make someone's nose, bleed or whatever. Like there's a good balancing act of stewardship here, but I want to pivot back to something too. I want to talk about, so we've talked a lot about like surface applied treatment. And I think in the last few years, we've also had some unlocks with a good friend of ours, Kevin from Design Technic. Hi, Kevin. And there's been an unlock because he's got a drywall replacement product. And I know you just did this in a big old room out in Ohio, right? And so like talks about, that's a different approach, right? That's not necessarily taking drywall and putting treatment on top of it. It's completely replacing drywall because, as Kevin would say, drywall is the worst acoustical product for music ever made.
Facts. Yep.
So, but yeah, talk about that a little bit of just what was the approach and what was the result?
Yeah. That room you're referencing is really that example I used earlier about like, hey, if we go with the traditional, let's call it a low tech approach of just volume of material, right?
Yeah.
Like the volume was ridiculous. One, tough to construct.
Yep.
Tough to retrofit in the space without eating into lobby space. And like you start doing the math, right? This building's costing you 200 and whatever square foot. Well, if we're occupying a couple of thousand square foot in acoustic treatment, like gets expensive really quick.
That's a good way to think of it.
What Kevin and Design Technic have is more a proprietary approach, right? And it's based on layers. It's wall construction replacement and a proprietary hole pattern that he won't explain to me why it does because he'll take that to his grave, I feel like. But that is his business. His business is, hey, I figured out essentially how to create a acoustic shock absorber is the way he would describe it. And I think it's a really cool way to describe it, right?
Yeah.
We allow that energy into the wall and through those layers and what is happening between those layers and that specific hole pattern on that material. It's taken that and efficiently, like dealing with your 40, 50, 60 hertz in about 3 or 4 inches, what we otherwise might take like several feet to do. And so, you know, what's great about having an approach like that up our sleeve is like we do really get to like use that math like I talked about and be like, man, like in good conscience, I can't suggest you spending hundreds of thousands of dollars just of construction costs before you add in the acoustic costs, just to have that volume of space. So how can we find a balance? And maybe this is more of an expensive product, but in the bigger scheme of things, it's actually more cost effective.
Well, and I think I think also the nice thing about drywall replacement, right, or wall material replacement is now we can get back to like the aesthetics of the room, right, and we can make it look closer to not just these panels slapped all over walls in some kind of a pattern. It's more like, gosh, like we can really tie in with the relief lines that the architect's looking for and the paint colors. Like it's completely custom and it's incredibly musical, right? And so it's a very different approach. And I think Kevin wants to come out and be on the podcast and really like unpack it because it's so different and yet it's so effective. So I think to wrap up and sum up, like there's a lot of different approaches to hit the church's vision, right? And depending on their musical style, how much audience reinforcement they want or don't want, and what the PA volume would be, there's a lot of ways that we can make sure that end result happens, right? But that acoustics are a big part of it. And while architects might have a degree in architecture, right, they also need a good balance of the person ultimately responsible for the audio experience to be speaking into it, right? And that can be in room shape, that could be in room volume, right? Lowering the ceiling, raising the ceiling. And it could also be in the kind of treatment that we apply. So, man, Starke, thanks for helping us unpack a lot of that. I think, again, this is one of those demystifying topics that we really need to do. And so thanks everyone for joining us on the Gear Follows Vision podcast. We're super excited to just dig into this with y'all. Hope y'all learned something. One thing we didn't talk about is the PA design. And so we're going to hit that on another podcast, I'm sure. Yeah, for sure. But thanks for joining us. Check out some of these other things on YouTube and we'll see you next time.